I'm Sarah Cott, Senior Vice President of Programming at The Hill, and thank you for joining us today in person and online for Every Mind Matters, the many dimensions of mental illness. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Otska, for their support of this wonderful discussion. We are here today to talk about an unprecedented mental health crisis in the U.S. As 2 in 5 American adults reported experiencing symptoms of anxiety and depression in 2001. Fortunately, the country has witnessed a positive sea change in recognizing the importance of mental health and self-care in recent years. But significant work still remains to create a system that recognizes the nuances and needs of those with mental illness, especially the 1 in 20 Americans with serious disorders. How can we break down the stigma associated with mental illness? How can we build comprehensive care systems to support all individuals affected by it? And how is prioritizing mental health intrinsically linked to good health overall? We will discuss these questions and more, but before we get underway, I would ask you all to please put your cell phones on silent in the room, and you can join our program via social media. You can follow us on Facebook, X, Instagram, at The Hill, and using our event tag, The Hill Mental Health. And with that, I am delighted to start our program by welcoming Bob Cusack, Editor-in-Chief of The Hill, to the stage. He will be moderating a bipartisan chat with Congresswoman Lisa McClain of Michigan and Congressman David Trone of Maryland, co-chairs of the Congressional Task Force on Mental Health and Substance Use Disorder. Welcome all. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thanks, Sarah. Let me first, Congresswoman, and we were saying backstage, it's good to have some bipartisanship in these polarizing times. Congresswoman, obviously got to start with a big question. Are we going to get a speaker today?
My crystal ball is completely broken right now. But if I was a betting woman, I would say not today.
Okay. Do you think this week would be... I went on TV and I said this week. I don't know who, but
I would
this week.
take that bet.
You would take that bet. Okay. I know.
It might be Mr. Trone over here, but who knows?
We hope for the best.
These days, you never know what's going to happen. Right?
Anything could happen.
Yes. Well, as I mentioned, this is a bipartisan event. This is a bipartisan issue. Can you both start off, Congresswoman, with you just why you're here, your connection to this issue? Everyone is affected. Everyone knows people who have gone through some difficult times. And then we can talk about the task force and the bipartisanship.
Quite simply, because it matters. I mean, at the end of the day, it matters. And it matters because, like you said, everyone has been touched by it. Right? We all have a family member, a friend. It's out there. And I think if you look at the bipartisan task force, it is one of the few places that is actually a bright spot where we can work in a bipartisan fashion to actually get some stuff done here in DC, right? I think for so long, mental illness has been, had that stigma attached. And it takes folks like Mr. Trone to take the lead and really say, hey, we have a problem, because you can't fix a problem until you first admit you have a problem. And then it takes some hard conversations and some tough legislation and to change people's mind, but really to move the ball forward. And I think this task force has done that with the help of folks like you, right? We talk about it now. Whether it's mental illness, whether it's the drug crisis, you name it. But we need to begin to heal from the inside out. And I'm ecstatic to be on the task force. And it's interesting. Whatever side of the aisle I go to and I say, hey, we're doing this for mental health. Oh, I want to help. I want to help. I want to help. It is an issue, unfortunately, but that truly does bring people together. So,
It clearly touches every family in America. 1 in 5 folks have some mental illness in their family. It's a concern in my family. The addiction issue is leading cause of death now, 18 to 45. Fentanyl, number 1 cause. I lost a nephew. He died of an overdose at age 24, so it's personal. So I think that's how the death toll has just mounted. Over 1 million folks have now perished to overdoses, and currently the numbers are 80% of that is fentanyl. So that's the killer right now. We went from the oxys and the opioids to the heroin, and now it's fentanyl. And mental health illness runs side by side, and of course justice impacted, and we do a lot of work on justice. Folks that are justice impacted, all three are just connected together.
Yeah.
So, Congressman, when you talk to mental health leaders and constituents on this issue, what are you hearing, and what are some of the solutions to the obstacles?
Well, the biggest issue we have right now is lack of mental health providers and/or addiction specialists. I'm on the Appropriations Committee, and we've tried to put in literally hundreds of millions of dollars to drive folks for loan forgiveness, to get folks, especially in rural areas and the urban areas. That's where you can't find a psychiatrist, you can't find a therapist, and they're certainly not going to take your insurance. They're going to only be paid, right on the spot. So a real shortage of folks in our schools, our prisons. There's just nobody that we can find to work in those jobs because the pay is too low and it's a tough job.
Congressman, what are you hearing?
I would concur. I spend a lot of time in the high schools, and the issue that I see most prevalent, and there are a lot of issues, but the issue that I see most prevalent is let's talk about COVID, right? It is what it is. Kids weren't in school, they weren't socialized for a little while. Whether you agree with that or disagree with that, it is irrelevant. The issue is that's the fact, and that's what happened. So now these children, they go back to school, right? And there's one counselor for maybe 250 children. Okay, let's even say in some of the best schools, 100. How is that one counselor supposed to deal with those 100 children? And those counselors have to do everything from class schedules to getting them ready for college to mental health. It's just a daunting task. So I think we have to get to the root of the cause, right? Whether you look at the prison system, whether you look at the addiction system, if you peel that onion back, it comes back to mental health. And a lot of times if we can get to those root issues, which I think starts in the schools, I think we're onto something. So we have to funnel more money. Yes, I'm a Republican. Oh my God, did you just hear? Don't quote me on that, I won't get reelected. But I'm dead serious, and I say that. We have to care about the mental health, and you know what? It comes back to money.
Every dollar we put in to addiction treatment, mental health treatment, we get $12 returned.
Yes.
1 to 12.
Yes.
So we underinvest in our most precious resource, our children.
Yes.
That's what we're all here for,
Yeah.
the next generation, and we don't spend money smartly,
Yeah.
and then we pay for it on the back end.
Right. And I'm not saying that that's an end-all, be-all, but, we know the problem, right? If we can catch the problem early, maybe we can correct 80% of the problem. But it costs money.
And one big positive is the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act has $3 billion. That's the first time the federal government's made a major investment. It's in 12 different programs. 3 of the big programs are 2 of the $3 billion. Then there's 9 more grants after that. But that hasn't rolled out yet as DOE finishes up how they're going to distribute it. But that's going to be a game changer for our educators and our students both. Because let's think about our educators too, because they're in the same boat and with all those same stressors.
You mentioned the task force, you mentioned legislation. Did that legislation come out of the task force? There are a lot of caucuses and task force on Capitol Hill. Honestly, a lot of them don't do anything. But you guys actually have a proven track record where you've introduced over 100 bills. You've gotten, I believe, 26 into law. Tell us about the task force and how it works.
Yeah, last session we got 26 bills passed the law. And our key is everything's going to be bipartisan. Bipartisan, that's the key. And this is such a pleasure to work together. And everybody really pulls together. And that's what I like about it a lot. But the big dollars on mental health came out of a concept in appropriations. And we had $1 billion in the appropriations budget in '23 for mental health and K-12. Then President Biden took that concept when the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, and he tripled it. And now what we've got to do is make sure we continue to fund it. We can't send our schools unfunded mandates like we did with IDEA, which should have been funded at 40%, and the best we've ever funded is 14.25%. So
I was high on 17.
you were pretty close.
And now there are some indications the Senate may follow your lead. There's possibly a bipartisan. What do you know about that?
You know, I'm encouraged, right? And what you'll find is the Senate will follow if we prove concept, right? Proof of concept. And I think you kind of humbled yourself. How many bills did we put into law last year?
26.
Think about this. Just grasp this. 26 into law. That means the House, the Senate, and the President signed it. 26. That is no small feat. And it's led by this man right here, and I don't think he takes enough credit for that. And you really are doing a remarkable job. And I think because of that, the Senate is now taking notice. And I believe you'll see a lot more getting done in the Senate.
We talked about children. Obviously, everyone is affected by COVID, but children really affected.
Yeah.
What has been the effect of that, in both a positive and negative way? It seems like now we're more open to talking about a sensitive topic than we used to, but COVID obviously set a lot of kids back.
Well, I think the negative is kind of apparent, right? We're social animals. We like to be socialized, right? The other thing is when the children were in their home and they couldn't socialize with their friends, where did they go to socialize? That's horrible. I mean, the internet, all that social media, right? But that was a negative that came out of it. I think the positive that came out of it, at least for me, I have a lot of rural districts. Rural communities, in my district. And we did a lot of telehealth. And mental health, right, was a big positive because before you'd have to drive 2 hours if you could even afford it, right? But now you could get on the internet and you could do a Zoom mental health meeting. I get it's not perfect and it's not as good as sitting down one-to-one, but it's a heck of a lot better, which really woke people up to, wow, we really have a problem. And although this isn't a perfect scenario, the telehealth, on a positive note, has really been influential in changing people's mind, but also getting people in the rural communities like I represent.
Yeah, we both come out of a pretty rural area. I go the whole way out to Garrett County. It's a 4-hour drive, from Montgomery County where my district starts. So that rural area, their number one issue is addiction, and it's like West Virginia, it just creeps over into my district, up into Michigan. So that telemental has been key, game changer. But the other big game changer coming is the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, $65 billion to broadband. That's going to change America, and that's going to let us do better telemental, telehealth. The only way we can bring drug costs down is telehealth. And that's what broadband bill is going to do for us and really help bring America together and let folks live in a rural spot and have the benefits of better pay for a job in an urban area.
Agreed.
And I imagine you have to remind people who live in urban areas that internet is not everywhere, and there needs to be an investment in that, because in the Acela corridor, you tell people, like, wait a minute, doesn't everyone have internet or strong internet? And that's not the case. And that puts a lot of kids at a disadvantage, right?
Yeah, we're probably 40% of the kids in my district, Washington, Allegheny, Garrett County, had no good internet reliable at their homes. I'm sure similar.
But again, I know that was a major negative during COVID, but it really exposed the need for broadband.
Yeah.
Local initiatives are very important. Congresswoman, you founded the North End Support Team in Macomb County. Tell us about that.
So I'm very proud of that organization, but it's a very embarrassing story for me. And I say it because one of my best friend's son died from an opioid overdose. You know, he's your typical, we all have it, high school football player, you know, has a shoulder injury, gets hooked on opioids, et cetera, et cetera. I thought, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but I'm part of the problem, I thought that all the drug addicts were living under a viaduct in the inner city. I mean, I'm embarrassed to say that, but that's the honest to God's truth, and if we can't start with the truth, then we're not gonna make any progress. Until it happened to me. I didn't see any of the signs. How could I not see any of the signs? I kind of liken myself to halfway intelligent, and it's like, woo, right? I didn't see it. So I was angry. Make a long story short, I was angry. I don't know who I was mad at. I was just angry, right? I was mad at myself. What do we do about it? Because now, once I opened my eyes, right, it was all around me. I was just too blind to see it. So what do? Well, if you go and you look at the justice system, as you touched on earlier, you know, I don't know the exact percentage in our community, but if you look at the bulk of the people that are in jail, that are incarcerated, has to do with a addiction problem, right? All right, well, what do? We don't lock them up. How does that fix the problem? It doesn't. So I started the drug court in my community, and it started very, very small. And in the first year, we put 18 people through the drug court. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but for our little community, and then every year it grows. And now we're up to, I think last cycle, it was 100 people that went through the drug court that actually broke the cycle. So you have to start with, what do? I'll tell one more little story is if you go to my website and you look at my family, there's one person that doesn't fit in the family. He happens to be 6'7" and African American. I'm 4'11". I don't know if you noticed, I'm sitting down, so it's hard to tell. But right under my nose, we had the funeral at my house, or the wake at my house, and Barrick, my son, came to the wake, and it was, you know, everyone's kind of having a good time. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, and he's crying in the middle, in the corner of my basement. And I said, "Honey, what's the matter?" And he said, "Ricky, who is the boy that passed away, he was the only family I had." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And I found out that his mother was incarcerated, or is incarcerated, and will never get out. And his dad is homeless on the street. He had no place to go. Now this is right under my nose, and I was too blind to see it. That's why I say it's very embarrassing. So probably the biggest thing my husband and I ever got in, I said, "Oh, honey, you can come live with us." So the next morning he got up and he said, "Miss Lisa, are you serious?" And I said, "Oh, absolutely. Perhaps I should have consulted with my husband prior to that." But he's
Stuff happens.
Exactly.
You know.
But he's been with us now for, I don't know, 12 years? So, yeah.
Fantastic.
That is
Yeah.
great. That's great.
And he's a blessing to me. So. Yeah.
Congressman, as far as people who need help, who are watching right now, what advice would you give to them? We do now have a national hotline, but at the local level, what works other than funding?
Well, I'd say the 988 line has been fantastic. And
Great idea.
I don't think anybody quite realizes the deaths that we have in our country by suicide. I mean, that number's just a shy under 50,000 deaths. That's 135 deaths today. Today, 135. Of those, about 28,000 are by firearm. So we could do a lot better there if we put in some different rules and regulations to make sure those firearms weren't available right when that person hit their low point. Because suicide's an impulsive situation, and the firearm is a game closer. So that's a big issue. It's a challenge for everybody, and we've also got to continue to connect better on all three things together: addiction, mental health, and of course the justice piece. And so we've also formed another group which we're working on called the Second Chance Caucus. So we went out, we got 20 Republicans, 20 Democrats, and we're all about getting folks a second chance. Everybody deserves that. We've all screwed up. And so that's, some of those folks have been, as Lisa said, been drug incarcerated, treating drugs like a crime, not a disease, and then we've got to help them get that second chance.
Or third or fourth. Right?
Yes.
Right. Going to open it up to questions as we have a few minutes left. Congressman, just want to ask you, well, both of you, what's the legislative agenda now? You said 26 laws have passed from the task force. I think a lot of people wouldn't have thought 26 laws passed in recent years. So what's on the agenda now?
Well, biggest thing on the agenda right now is get that speaker.
That would help.
Yes, can't do anything
Unfortunately, that's
until
our
that.
fault.
Lisa's going to handle that very shortly. But no, we actually had a press conference maybe 2 weeks ago, and we put out a printed agenda of 70-some bills we have that are out there now running. And so a lot of ideas we had last year, like the Parental Support Act. I did that with Dan Muser, a chance to help folks around the person that's addicted. So like my nephew was addicted, what do? Well, I'm not the first person to deal with that. Let other folks learn from that. And we got to drive MAT treatment also and get that out there, much medically assisted treatment. And we've got to drive research. So I've talked to folks, of course, at NIDA, at ARPA-H. We need big bets on brain research. And that's what ARPA-H has got to do, take big bets, $100 million bets, and we're going to have failure. And when they fail, Lisa and I are going to say, that's okay. Let's take what we learned from that and keep moving. But the research is on addiction and on mental illness. That's tough research.
Yeah.
Let me open it up to questions. We have staff, and if you can identify yourself and ask a short question, if you want to raise your hand.
We did a good job.
Okay, wow, you got an awful lot. Let me ask a follow-up. Will the goal be for some of this legislation, as I imagine the 26 were attached to a must-pass bill, maybe some type of CR or something along those lines?
Obviously, yes.
Okay.
The other thing I think we have to really watch is the flow of the money. Because so many times what I've seen is we pass legislation and $100, for example, starts here. And by the time it gets to the place, where the rubber meets the road, that $100 turns into about 38. I mean, this is critical. These are critical dollars, and you want to talk about a return on investment. I don't think there's a better return on investment than mental health.
Yeah, Lisa's right. The money often gets sort of lost in the distribution, but the state opioid response grants, what I love about that bill is $1.75 billion a year for the next 5 years. We're fully funding appropriations, maybe overfunded even one day. And but the point is that goes right to the states. So the governors can make the decisions, and because they're much more on the ground
Yeah, they're closer.
than we are.
Yeah.
And does the task force, because legislation gets a lot of attention, especially from the political media, but implementation doesn't get as much. Are you guys following how the administration implements those 26 laws very closely?
We have to. I mean, there's no question. We absolutely have to be the good stewards.
And
of
how
the
are they
money.
doing? How is the administration doing? I mean, usually it is delayed. The transportation bill will take many, many years to implement.
Yeah, SAMHSA has really stepped up. I mean, SAMHSA is the biggest group that drives all this area, and they've really stepped up. And President Biden has leaned into addiction, and he's leaned into mental health. I've spoken to him directly about it a dozen times, and his point is real clear. Just like our family and everyone's family, it's affected his family addiction, and mental health has affected his family. It's personal to the president, and he's very much leaned in. And his example sets the tone.
Agreed.
Give you the last word.
I just appreciate Mr. Trone. I think it is a passion, and without you and your work, I mean, it really does matter. It really does matter, and I appreciate all of you all, really taking the time to be here today. It's critical, and if we truly want to break the cycle, we have to start with healing the inside. And just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. But I also think we have to begin to educate people, right? We need to, when we're at those cocktail parties or those events and we hear people chattering, it really is our responsibility, if we truly care, to insert ourselves in those conversations and correct the truth with the other half of the truth. Don't let me be the example in my ignorance, right? I wish I would have figured this out a lot earlier. I finally did. But we have got to begin to stand up and say, no, 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 hang on, hang on. It is not that. It is an illness. And if you truly want to help and you truly want to break the cycle, yeah, it starts with us opening our mouth and saying something. Don't sit back silent, and then everybody wants to talk about it, but you got to get involved. You got to help. You got to volunteer, right?
And I'll tell you, the press is really important in this because the more we can talk about it in the press, the more we break the stigma down.
Yes.
And we get folks comfortable saying, hey, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
I'm not okay. And that's a good day. And then we can go from there.
Well, thank you for your perspectives. I know you have a busy day. I know you got to go back and elect Speaker Trone, so I'll let you go. Please thank our representatives.